access.
David Bell, who's Director of Standard Policy and who is the chair of the Senelec Task Force on Africa. Sen being like the ARSO of Europe. He will also tell us on the role of standard within this European Union single market. Then probably we can learn more on the role that ARSO has in the implementation of the AfCFTA. Then we'll have a wrap up with Dr. Francis Mangani, who is the head of trade promotion and programs at the AfCFTA Secretariat, who will now tell us, looking at the AfCFTA agreement, we have so many stakeholders. How do those stakeholders will be brought together for the implementation of the AfCFTA agreement? Thank you very much. I welcome you once again. Don't forget to check on interpretation. If you want to listen to French or English, if you have questions, you can also send us the question on the chat. Without further delays, I would like to request Ruben Gisore, you have the right to share your presentation and you have 7 minutes for your presentation. Thank you very much. Welcome, Ruben Gisore. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Secretary General, and welcome to all those who are present for this webinar today. I'll go straight to my presentation, and I'll start basically with a summary of what we have done at the ARSO Secretariat in conjunction or in partnership with the member states, the regional economic communities, and other partners. This is currently what we have. We have 15 broad sectors that we utilize for harmonization. And these broad sectors, under which we have various technical committees, have developed the following number of standards. In total, we have 1,469. And you'll see the ones that are highlighted indicate those that have had a recent activities responding to some of the issues that are arising in the continent. So it doesn't mean that the rest of the sectors are not active, but those are the sectors that are active. Now, when you come to the classification of the standards, you realize that the total represents standards which include product specifications, test methods, codes of practice, and glossaries. So out of this, we do have 620 being product standards. Now, in accordance with the trade agreement, the AfCFTA trade agreement, the number of tariff lines that we do have, unless there's an update, we do have 4,547. And if you look at the product standards and they compute the representation, then you find that the number of standards we've done represent 13.6% of the products covered under those tariff lines. Now that tells you that we have a gap of 86.4 products to be covered, and that calls for rapid or accelerated harmonization of standards. Now, if you look at the regional economic communities where all the international arrangements of trade, you look at Europe, you look at other organizations where they are doing trade, you realize that the ease of trade between countries is directly related to the number of harmonized standards in those trading blocks. Now, if the standards are less or they are fewer than the number of products that are prioritized for trade, it also means that the amount of trade that happens is quite low. Now that you can check elsewhere and you'll find that countries or regions with a good stock of standards that are harmonized actually interact more in trade. Now, what does it mean for Africa? We are lucky that there is a rich depository of international standards. If you look at ARSO, you look at IEC, Codex, IPPC, there are quite a number of standards that we can utilize to fill the gap. But at the same time, we also have standards from African regional economic communities and other areas that we can utilize. Now, in respect of doing standards, it requires serious partnerships, and that is what can actually make things move. And we appreciate the partnerships that we've had with the member states, some of them even sponsoring the actual work of harmonization, good partnerships with the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, regional economic communities, the COMESA, ESC, SADC Tripartite Free Trade Area, the National Meteorology Institute of Germany, and then we have the GIZ from Germany. At the same time, very interesting and very good partnerships with African-based financial institutions. That's the Africa Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, and the African Development Bank. Same with other international agencies like the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation through the Arab Africa Trade Bridges Initiative, and also the European Union. Some of these partnerships really help in accelerating the work of harmonization. Now, in terms of the annex that we have, what are the objectives? You look at the AfCFTA agreement and you realize that what we aim to get is facilitating trade through cooperation in standards, technical regulations, conformity assessment, accreditation, and metrology. These are some of the areas of cooperation. And so what do they really look at? It is strengthening those areas of mutual interest and priority areas that we have identified. Now, some of these priority areas have been subject to studies, and we have the latest studies that were done by UNECA, as well as the regional economic communities coming together to agree on what are the priorities with respect to their strategic development plans. And in that respect, then we do have priorities that have been identified from which we work. We don't, for example, try to work on everything at the same time, but look at what are those areas that guide us on how to move forward. Now, when you look at the specific requirements that are given in Annex 6 of the AfCFTA agreement, you realize that member states are very conscious, or state parties are conscious of the fact that their national standards bodies need to work together. And when they work together, that means then the harmonization of standards can take place, and this shall promote the adoption of international standards as well as developing our own Africa-based standards, promote the adoption of standards developed by ARSO and or AfCFTA, and then where relevant or international standards are not available, the two bodies, that is AfCFTA and ARSO, need to come together and develop these standards. So when these bodies come together, which I think right now is being realized by all the member states, then it is possible that we could come up with one standard that fits all the member states instead of each member state struggling to do their own standard. And then finding that at the end of the day, the standard does not create harmony between trading partners and actually creates trade barriers. So that emphasis that member states need cooperation between their standardization bodies is very important. I think it needs to be given priority if the continent is going to have harmonized standards and conformity assessment to trade. Now, what happens when we do not have harmonized standards? Then you find that there are technical regulations and standards are applied by member states, which are more stringent. And this is what has been found out in many of the studies that we've come across, that there are more national standards that are more stringent than those that are provided by international bodies. Now, that stringency sometimes is informed by the kind of knowledge that is available at the national level, but at the same time, you find that there are testing facilities that member states could have access to, which have a high level of sensitivity than that which is necessary to justify grounds of health or safety, and therefore making the cost of testing disproportionately high and prohibitive to companies, to trading partners. And using this kind of approach, then it means that barriers are created that are not actually necessary when you look at the AfCFTA agreement and even the WTO agreement. Now, how do we move towards removing the barriers to trade that arise from utilizing standards that are divergent and technical regulations based on such standards? We can do this by harmonization of standards and technical regulations, having mutual recognition agreements or arrangements, and recognition of equivalency of technical regulations, which can now give way to the harmonization proper to take place in due time, because the harmonization takes much more time. So their goal has been to reduce what the industry considers to be technical barriers to trade posed by national regulatory requirements. And if that is achieved, then we can have products moving across our borders. So one of the operating principles when you look at our regional trade arrangements is the issue of mutual recognition. And in these, member states must accept products from other member states if products fulfill equivalent safety requirements. And if a member state does not accept a product, then they need to demonstrate that indeed that product does not meet their requirements, and it will be a cause of safety or health concern to them. So member states must accept test results and certificates from competent conformity assessment bodies, which must be notified, of course. And all national technical regulations must include that recognition clauses, references to accreditation, for example. When you look at Agenda 2063, one of the enshrined issues is the free movement of persons, capital, goods, and services. And for this to happen, we really need to have harmonized standards and technical regulations. A good example is what happens in the European Union, where free movement of goods is a pillar for the success of the Union. So how do we achieve that? That again comes to the issue of standardization, harmonizing standards and conformity assessment and technical regulations, and having mutual recognition arrangements that are respected by all member states. So in Africa, what we know we have a wide scope of products that we trade in. We need to start by piloting some of the products that we do trade with. And this can start by having a product coverage indicating a certain number of products that have been identified as priority. And then provision of consultation and right to withdraw from the MRAs in case there are market access obstacles. Providing a listing of relevant conformity assessment bodies, which the mutual recognition arrangements would cover. And this requires that we develop the capacities of the conformity assessment bodies in the member states. They can be based on one member state, or they can be working across the borders. And then there would be the arrangements of what can a member state be allowed to do, flexibility, and then opting in or out. So such things need to be done. In the context of what ARSO has done to really ensure that this is enshrined or this is actualized, we have the conformity assessment body, conformity assessment committee, which addresses two aspects. The aspect of standards implementation, which is of course the conformity assessment issues. And then we have the aspect of technical regulations. Now, this is one area that we're taking very seriously in terms of ensuring that for each sector, the kind of technical regulations which are required are looked at, and we have the fundamentals of harmonization taking place. Now, the pioneering aspect in this respect, I would say, is the pharmaceuticals and medical devices and equipment that we started from last year to address the issues of the pandemic that we are facing and any future pandemics, where we are looking at regulations that address issues of medicines and pharmaceutical products, medical devices and equipment. So in this case, then we are looking at having established a foundation for technical regulations to be harmonized for those aspects which are very critical in ensuring that we can have pharmaceutical products and medical devices moving across the continent. Thank you very much. I'm ready to get any questions coming for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben, for the presentation. You mentioned that there is a deficit of 86.4% when you're looking at the tariff line and looking at the standards that are reaching around 1,469, developed by a technical expert on the continent within ARSO framework. How do you see that ARSO can manage to cover this deficit strategically to allow now our private sector to start trading using the harmonized standard?
Thank you very much. What we have done is to explore, because our experts are able to explore looking at existing international standards or national standards or standards from other regional groupings like the European Union. And we realize that there's a good depository of those standards that we can utilize. But the issue is not about looking at the standards and just adopting, but analyzing those standards vis-a-vis the African continent's need. And once we identify that these standards are possibly good for purposes of fitting a certain aspect, then they are taken through a fast tracking procedure that doesn't take long to have the standards in place. So this gives us a space of within a space of 6 months or less, it's possible to analyze using those experts, the international standards that can fit whichever tariff line, then we can comfortably say that we have addressed that. Now, if we find that it doesn't exactly fit, then it means that we need to work on it. But that also, we have a process of fast tracking that enables us to cover more ground within a shorter time than what would ideally be something starting from scratch. Now, in the process, we do not skip the issues of consensus. We ensure that that is complied with. We do not skip the issue of consulting stakeholders. We ensure that they're involved, but the process can cover that quite fast. And because the fields are broad, we are happy that some of the stakeholders are currently working with us in making sure that we can mobilize resources, because the experts need resources to participate in the work. And therefore, we work with partners to ensure that we are able to mobilize the experts, provide them with the resources they require so that they can participate in the harmonization process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruben, for the explanation. I would like to move to our next speaker, who is Dr. Oswald Chinyamakovu, who will be discussing the technical regulations within the AfCFTA agreement. Dr. Oswald, yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay. We also just show my face and acknowledge all the colleagues that are joining us for this webinar and all the fellow panelists that are also going to be sharing and inviting all of us to recognize the special season that Africa finds itself in on account of the AfCFTA. We all have a role to play, and we all need to ensure that we reduce poverty on our continent. I would like to use my first couple of slides just to put into context the sharing that I will do on technical regulation. I must also say that Ruben, in his presentation, has made very good references to technical regulations already. So he has somewhat made my task easier. So just for the sake of colleagues that may not have been following in detail the developments of the AfCFTA, what I have on the screen is the structure of the agreement as we have it. At the top there, we have the framework agreement, which is the main instrument that guides the shape and form of our agreement. But it is supported by a cascade of documents or instruments for various technical areas, starting with protocols. And at the protocol level, you have a protocol on trading goods, trading services, dispute settlement, and more protocols will be negotiated and adopted later on. But if I confine myself to trading goods, which is the area relevant to our discussion, that protocol on trading goods is further supported by several annexes on specific technical aspects. In fact, this is where you find a lot of the work in terms of implementation of the agreement. And some of those annexes are further supported by appendices. Okay, sorry, I just have to move on back. In terms of the annexes to the protocol on trading goods, there's 9 at the moment, but I've highlighted one there, which is relevant to the discussion on standards and technical regulations. But at least you can see what sort of documents guide the implementation of our AfCFTA in the different areas for facilitation of trade. Now,
also, if we can raise the voice, I see complaints, that people are not hearing you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, maybe let me use the other microphone. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's better. I'm now using another microphone. But I'm literally shouting right now, so I hope it's working. So
yeah, that's better.
Is that better? Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Let's start off by maybe understanding what exactly technical regulation is. Ruben has just shared with us what a standards is and how that process of standardization works. Now, technical regulations are documents which lay down product characteristics or the related processes and production methods, including applicable administrative provisions. Now, if I stopped right there, I would essentially have told you what a standard is. But if I add the part which follows and is underlined, and the part reads, with which compliance is mandatory, I have converted what might be a standard document to a technical regulation. It has now become something that is legally enforceable, and with which, if you don't comply, there might be penalties associated with that. So it's very important to appreciate that technical regulations are legal instruments and they're supported by law. Now, technical regulations are generally put in place to safeguard health and safety and to protect the environment, as we heard earlier. And of course, this makes them very legitimate instruments because governments have a duty to protect society and the environment, and just to ensure that we are all living safely and in a healthy way. Now, in the AfCFTA, we find the reference to technical regulations in the annex on technical barriers to trade. It's annex number 6.
Oswald, we lost you. Oswald. Oswald, we have lost you. Maybe while we reconnect with Oswald, I would probably, we will try to reconnect with Oswald from Addis. Let's move to the next speaker before and wait for Oswald to come back. Yeah, we'll take from where he started. Our next speaker is Dr. Celestine Okanya. He will be discussing with us on one standard, one test accepted everywhere, clearing the technical barriers to trade under the single African market, the role of Pan-African Equality Infrastructure. Dr. Celestine is the Pan-African Equality Infrastructure chairperson. Dr. Celestine, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you everyone for being on this webinar. This is a very important one for our continent. I hope I'm being heard clearly and loud, Chair.
Yes, we can hear you clear and loud. Thank you. Celestine, I think you have also a challenge with the network. Celestine. Doctor. We cannot hear you now, Celestine. another challenge with connectivity. Yeah, now when we are talking about the trading with one another, and we don't have very, very good infrastructure, as we can see, it's become also another challenge. We will come back to them as I want to use the time wisely. Yeah, we will probably share the presentation. Celestine, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. What we do, let's share the presentation from ARSO. Then
Okay.
you reduce the bandwidth. Yeah. Yeah. You
Okay,
will tell
please,
us
go ahead.
the next slide. Thank you. Dan, you can share.
All right. I'm waiting. Okay. While we're waiting for the slide, if you can still hear me, I was saying that Ruben had laid the proper foundation for this. And for us to have a single market where technical barrier won't be much of a problem, then we need to have one standard, one test accepted everywhere. And that is what I'm going to be speaking to you about. I'm still waiting. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, Ruben took time to explain all that the standard could do for us in clearing the technical barrier, but specifically what the examples of the challenge we face when we are discussing technical barrier is that of variations of standard from country to country for product and services. You can also have differences in our conformity assessment procedures. You can also have variations in labeling requirements. These are the issues that if we need to have a free trading with ourselves, we need to harmonize the standard, harmonize the conformity assessment, and this will bring us close to what we are trying to achieve. One standard, one test, and well, I think we've talked a lot about reasons why we should standardize. It's clear we have to work very hard to harmonize our standards and conformity assessment. Next slide. Okay. The first step that will grant us what we desire, one standard and one test accepted everywhere. First step was harmonization of standards. And I say this with a lot of respect for ARSO. That was the first step. And for us to have a harmonized standard without having to face the challenges of differences in our result, differences in our conformity, assessment, interpretation, we need also to harmonize the conformity assessment procedures. Again, ARSO has been working on this for a while. And my emphasis here is that these are the foundations on which every other quality infrastructure activities are going to be built. And I will encourage colleagues to continue work, especially ARSO and AfCFTA, to continue working in this aspect to harmonize both the standards and the conformity. Next slide. So the second step where we will be looking forward to achieving when we have standards harmonized, conformity assessment harmonized. That's to say, that's area where accreditation, area where it's going to provide. I think really runs a lot. Okay, sorry, I think we're having a lot of issues with network, but let's try again. So the second step of making this progress, Chairman, I hope you're hearing me now.
Yes, now we can hear you. Yeah, thank you.
Are you hearing me, SG?
Yes, now I can hear you. We can hear you. Yeah, please continue.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you for that confirmation. So, like I said, having made the first step of okay. So the second stage that the quality infrastructure family need to spend working on is to ensure that we have confidence in our assessment results, which will be used in trading. And it will be easier if we continue to achieve harmonization both of the standards and the conformity. Now, accreditation provides that confidence by ensuring that conformity assessment bodies are accredited based on meeting the international standards. Rating. SG, can you hear me? Are you back?
Yes, now you are back. Yeah, it's not really stable. Yeah. Maybe you can try to summarize. Yeah, without going through all the slides, and we will share your presentation.
Okay. Well. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, because that's where I need to present the real issue. Okay, so stop here. Now, the agreement provides that go back to the first slide, the first step, go back. The agreement provides that we use mutual recognition arrangements. And when you look at ILAC, IAF mutual recognition that we have. I simply lifted that of ILAC here to show the challenge that we have in Africa. There are about 102 accreditation bodies out of this 102, Africa has only about 7. And we have 54 countries signed on to now when what the agreement requires and annexes, relying on MRA, MLA for accreditation and all that. But is it really technically feasible? That's why I wanted to this is really frustrating. Okay, so what do we do as a continent? What are we going to do with this kind of challenge we have? I think there is, and there should be suggestion for us as a continent, as a single market, to begin to think more creatively and innovative about how do we accept each other's results, other than the mutual recognition that is based on ILAC MRA. Like I said, that would have been the ideal. But how long will it take the members, the 52 members, to achieve such an environment, technically and otherwise, where we are all signed on to MRA and MLA of ILAC and IEF? It's a difficult time, it's a difficult thing to achieve within a short time. So we need to begin to think for what's an alternative, what's the African solution to this? I think it's a conversation that PACI will begin to have with the pillars, and we can come up with a very fun that I think that is much more. Next slide. Next slide again this is saying the same thing. Let's go to the challenges. Go ahead. Next slide. Okay, so this unique challenge, like I've said, 7 member states have achieved MRA out of 54. Not good for us, not good for this trade. Then what can we do? We can expand this membership by encouraging member states to get more committed and invest more on the accreditation systems for their country. What else can we do? We can figure out on interim basis a workable means of mutual recognition. That's what I've been trying to emphasize. Like I said, it should be a continuous conversation that we can begin to have at the AU level and PACI level with the pillars. And I think we can find a solution to this. Then the need for continuation of the harmonization of standards and conformity assessment procedures prior products and services that are of priority for us. And then the need for the member states to use international standards or harmonized standards for technical regulation. If we can address these unique challenges this way, I think we can actually achieve that one standard and one test accepted everywhere. Next slide. And I think that should be all. Our role as PACI simply will be to continue providing this knowledge and advisory role for the African Union, in this case for the Single Market Authority, And we will continue to see pillars in providing the platform for meeting, training, and forum to deal with these issues and the challenges that we are raising on this platform, and offering technical solutions to issues relating to quality systems by providing coordination of responses of the quality pillars in the case of joint projects, research, or studies. And PACI will continue to provide that technical support required for addressing the issues raised or issues contained in Annex 6 and 8. So PACI has a huge role in implementing both the agreement for the AfTA and then in the implementation of quality policy by providing technical guide and interpretation for the policy. I think these are areas where PACI has a big role to play, but in conclusion, what if there is nothing else we can
Celestine, we can't get you for your conclusion.
Yeah. We can achieve able to services, quality infrastructure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we couldn't get you for your conclusion. Yeah.
Oh, I'm saying that my conclusion is very simple, that we must continue harmonization of both standards, conformity assessment, and our way of managing our mutual recognition outside the IAF, ILAC requirements, because it might take us a long time to achieve for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Maybe one question for you, if the connection allows. I know that Pan-African Equality Infrastructure with member state consultation developed the quality policy, African equality policy. Do you think the African equality policy will address some of the challenges that you mentioned?
Yes, Chairman, the quality policy has laid a foundation for resolving all these issues. Of course, the quality policy provided clear path for standardization, metrology, accreditation, and conformity assessment. So if we implement smartly the quality policy as already approved, then we are on the pathway to finding a long-lasting solution to it. But I think what we need to do right now that we are already trading is to be clever enough to begin implementation of that document, because it will resolve most of the issues I raised here.
Thank you very much. I would like to move to Ms. Stella Polot, who will give us the experience of implementing the standard within the regional economical community, East Africa community specifically. Ms. Polot, Stella, please go forward.
Thank you, everyone. It's indeed a privilege to participate in this important discussion. And I would like to thank ARSO for organizing this. And it's my pleasure on behalf of the ESC to share our experiences. to share our experiences as far as ESC is concerned. And in presenting in doing this, this is the outline of my presentation. I'll share with you what have been our enablers in terms of policy and the legal framework, ESC achievements in trade facilitation through standards and technical regulations, the lessons we have learned in trying to get these achievements, some challenges, and probably later, if time allows, some proposals for Africa CFTA. We are all aware that the policy and the legal framework is very important for any robust quality infrastructure. And this is something which has worked in the ESC from the policy perspective, the treaty that establishes ESC, the customs union that establishes a free trade area, and the common market protocol. All these key policy documents make reference to standards. They realize the fact that standards and conformity assessment, as well as metrology and accreditation, are critical in pushing the ESC integration agenda. And we have the SQMT protocol that was negotiated, and thereafter the SQMT Act. The Act actually provides a framework. After being mentioned in the treaty, the Act provides the actual framework, how we cooperate in the area of standardization, quality assurance, metrology, and testing. Still in terms of the framework, the legal framework, we have other protocols, the SPS protocol, that one looks mainly at the SPS issues. We have the NTB Act, which provides a mechanism for identifying and monitoring elimination of NTBs. And we have a one-stop border post Act, which also provides for coordination and timely clearance. You realize that all these policy documents and legal documents facilitate the work of standards and technical regulation. It gives the emphasis that for you to have a robust quality infrastructure, you need to have a supportive policy and legal framework. These respective policies and legal instruments have made ESC to realize some of the achievements. So going clearly to the achievements, like I said, the SQMT Act is the one that provides a framework for cooperation, specifically on SQMT-related activities. One of the biggest achievements has been the domestication of this act. What do I mean by domestication? You find that this act, partner states are consistent, the principles, in terms of the technical subcommittees, partner states are represented in all the various technical subcommittees. We have a subcommittee on standards, we have a subcommittee on quality assurance, we have a subcommittee on metrology, we have a subcommittee on testing, a subcommittee on codex forum, and a TBT forum. You find that that is one of the ways of really domesticating this act, so that the members from the various partner states are able to participate in those specific subcommittees, consider the technical discussions, and these technical discussions are channeled through the ESC policy organs, and that makes it possible for adoption and implementation. It makes adoption and implementation easier. So also one of the key achievements has been the coming up with the procedures for harmonization of standards. To date, we have 1,822 standards, and 1,227 of these standards are direct adoptions. We have made a lot of head through with these procedures. It shows that for you to, the procedures are very clear on how we come up with the new work item proposals, the processes you go when we are harmonizing the standards, so that at the end of it all, there is ownership. You put money in the process, and at the end of it, you find that there is ownership of the standards. And this has been progressing over the years. We now have the third version of these procedures. And also what is important, these procedures are benchmarked to international best practices. So it gives confidence to our standards and also ownership by the partner states. In relation to standards, we came up with a regional standardization plan. And at the ES, we try so much to benchmark what happens at the international level. At the ISO level, there was a model for coming up with the national standardization plans, because this is important so that whatever standards you come up with, they make impact economically and socially, and they should be linked to the national development plans. So based on the national development, the national standardization plans, we came up with a regional standardization plan. And the beauty of this now, when the partner states of ESC are harmonizing standards, you don't look at work at national as separate from the work at regional, because you have considered your national development plans. You find that when you harmonize standards at the regional level, you rationalize resources. To us, this is one of the achievements, because we have started following this regional standardization plan. And at the end of it all, we easily rationalize the work plans for harmonization. The other issue which is clear in the SQMT Act is the notification and the mutual recognition of the quality marks. I know trade in ESC is still limited at about 17%, but critically, if you were to look at what has facilitated that limited trade, it is standards and conformity assessment, especially the mutual recognition of the quality marks. This is an achievement, although there are challenges in some sectors, but to a greater extent, mutual recognition of marks is an achievement in the ESC. And because we have been able to realize trade, it has also given us opportunity to come up with other innovative ways of addressing those specific areas where there are challenges in the recognition of the marks. The other issue still related to benchmarking on international good practices. In the beginning, it was not easy to just simply recognize, as much as the Act was saying, mutual recognize each other's mark. We needed to build trust and confidence in these marks. So we started doing the peer assessment for certification marks, also inspection and market surveillance. And this is something that has now created some trust and confidence, and to a greater extent, it has facilitated trade. And of course, also the other achievement of operationalization of the single customs territory and interconnectivity. These are some of the enablers that have helped the trade to move in the region. The other achievement is on proficiency testing. These are all aspects related to conformity assessment. We all know that accreditation is the ideal, but we did look at, really, when you look at accreditation in the region, the infrastructure is not fully developed. It is still developing. So the best approach was to see, let's focus on proficiency testing so that we mutually recognize each other's test certificates. And this also focused on the commonly traded goods, and more so on those goods where there were always a number of challenges. So the best thing was to focus like things like wheat, maize, cooking oil, salt, sugar, soap, really to share, to develop a scheme. And I'm really glad to say that this scheme has developed so much. ESC has expanded it to also to some countries in Southern Africa. It has been expanded also to Asia, and it has also been expanded to some countries in Europe. So it makes acceptance easier. And now we are moving into the next step of ensuring, because the scheme has expanded, we're moving towards seeing how best can we accredit the proficiency testing providers. So we're now moving, we have already a roadmap to see how to do the accreditation, as much as we are continuing to develop accreditation infrastructure in the region. What really to emphasize here, in most cases, the stepwise approach to some of the interventions in the long run sometimes gives some results. We have also harmonized procedures for market surveillance and import inspection. Basically, because there have been a number of NTBs, so the best was to base on the international standards that govern these areas and try to harmonize the procedures, how each country does it. The other achievement is on the review of the SQMT Act 206. To ESC in itself, the review of this act is an achievement, though it is ongoing at the final stages, is an achievement in itself. We have been able to learn what was wrong, what has worked, and what needs to be changed. Especially, we are trying to see what are the key elements that should be coordinated at the regional level. What are the critical aspects that should be handled at the national level? A case in point in this is the issue of technical regulations. The previous act, the way it was like the implementation of mandatory standards was to be done at the Secretariat, the ESC Secretariat. But over time, we have learned that even by definition from WTO, countries have an obligation. They have the duty to come up with technical regulations. At the same time, they are the ones that have administrative mechanism to implement and enforce these technical regulations. So what is the best way forward? If we are to look at the technical regulations, the issue has been, which is being provided in the act to be reviewed, is the framework. At the regional level, let's provide a framework to ensure that when we come up with technical regulations, when we're implementing them, we're at par, we're at the same level. But let's the right to come up with them remain with us, but let's be transparent. And that's why also we have focused on the issue of notification. Transparency is critical. In the past also, this is one area also that has improved so much. We got some support from the USAID, and we're able to focus in building capacity specifically on notification. Because when it comes to technical regulation, notification is key. So still related to technical regulations, basing from the fact that it's the partner states that have the mechanism to implement and enforce. The focus at the ESC has been whatever intervention, it has to be, trade has to be in the picture. In this respect, when I talked about the mutual recognition, in the mutual recognition, we've been having challenges in the mutual recognition in the area of foods and cosmetics. A lot of NTBs were coming in this area. So the approach was to go stepwise. Let's develop a framework first for cross-border movement of prepackaged foods and cosmetics. And because it was impacting negatively on trade, you find that it was easy to get the attention of all the partner states. So now we have this framework that has already been approved at the policy level, and now it is really awaiting implementation. And also still to do with that framework, the best way forward was also to come up with a criteria, because the challenges come because there are different mechanisms, there are different procedures in registration, in certification, and also maybe clearance as far as these foods are concerned. So the focus was really, let's focus on seeing where are the areas where we can harmonize, where are the areas where we can mutually recognize, and where are the areas where we can have equivalence, because those are all the principles that facilitate trade. So that is one achievement. And also we have the NTB. I talked about one of the policy, one of the enablers was the NTB Act. You know, standards in a way can be NTBs, but the establishment of the NTB Regional Forum, the NTB time-bound program in resolving NTBs is one of the achievements, because it sieves, NTBs are sieved at the national, and they are taken to the right technical committees, they are taken to the right organs, and in the end that you find that implementation becomes easy. So what are the lessons learned, having given some of those achievements? One is stakeholder involvement in the process to a greater extent facilitates adoption and implementation. Just the case in point is the issue in the harmonization of standards. This is one of the areas we have gone for a long time. We started harmonizing standards in 2000 up to about somewhere mid in 2010. There were challenges, standards were not being taken. As much as it was clear in the Act, each partner state within 6 months should adopt the standards. But because we have involved all the partner states, especially in the approval of the new work item, especially focusing in trade. Now, even in the review of our Act, there are proposals that let the approval of the final standards be brought to the Standards Committee, because probably still it takes long, and because the adoption, the uptake has now increased. When there are delays before the standards are gazetted, I get a number of calls from partner states. When are you finalizing the standards we want? Which to me is really, and it has happened because we are involving the partner states. And also in the past, we used to depend so much on development partners in the harmonization of standards. But now because of that involvement, there is the partner states, 3/4 of the standards work is really supported by the partner states. Stakeholder involvement also goes to what I've just talked about in terms of the technical regulations. And the other issue is on the harmonization and implementation of conformity assessment procedures. One lesson we have learned that there is a lot at international level, but it's always best to benchmark and come up with their procedures, whatever we do, benchmark on the best, because it enhances confidence, trust when you're looking at mutual recognition. The other lesson is partnership with the private sector and development partners. It has helped us to move a number of programs forward. And one good thing, because the work plans are clearly approved through the structures, the EAC structures and the policy organs. So when we approach the development partners, you find that it is clear on the areas where we need the support. And the other lesson learned is really most of these achievements have been possible because we have domestication of the regional laws. In the ESC, SQM Act is one of those, and maybe the Customs Management Act. And when you look at the implementation of those two areas, because those legal instruments have been domesticated to the greater extent, you see that there is progress. So what are the challenges? Despite those achievements, there's still low publicity and awareness of these policies. As much as these policies, these laws are there to make things happen, but sometimes the awareness is still low. People don't know their rights, people don't know their obligations, and yet these policies are there to support them. And there is also the national laws versus regional laws. They need domestication. Like in the ES, in some areas where this has not been done, you find that there's still a challenge. And of course, there's this issue of counterfeits, which is overwhelming sometimes, and the limited human capacity in the implementing institutions at the partner states and also at the ESC Secretariat. The capacity is limited, but it's an area to be looked at. And also the capacity differs from partner state to the partner state. And yet when there is one weak link, you need to have specific interventions to bring that weaker link also to another level. So capacity, apart from the numbers, also varying from partner state to partner states is a challenge. Case in point is really on, excuse me, is really on the accreditation, which is very critical, but you find that that capacity is still limited, is still being built in the region. And also in the implementation of especially conformity assessment is still also an issue. The capacity differs. And sometimes there's limited analysis of the issues, the support, there's the research data to support standards work and market intelligence. And of course, sometimes there are sovereignty issues, competition. Those are still the challenges that come in. And what then are maybe my proposals? We need deliberate and enhanced awareness, like in the AfCFTA, we have a lot of policy documents at the moment, but we need to ensure that there is deliberate awareness for especially the SMEs and the business community. Sometimes the technical persons are aware on this, but we need the general public to be aware and appreciate this. Close collaboration and information sharing, capacity building at the Secretariat to monitor whatever is being agreed on, and also at the partner states level for implementation of these quality infrastructure activities, domestication of the laws, and the capacity building. Asante sana.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you for the good presentation. Very interesting that you also have done the harmonization of procedure for market surveillance and import and inspection. I think that market surveillance is very, very crucial. Looking at what Celestine was also presenting, the issue of accreditation and peer review assessment that you have, how do you link to those two, the peer review assessment that you have, the mutual recognition of quality mark, and looking at also the sufficient accredited bodies that we have on the continent? Do you think the peer review assessment can help?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Like I said, peer review is one of the principles of the good practices in conformity assessment. And it's just really seeing where are the gaps. Of course, the best is really to have accreditation, but in absence, as you are building that, you need to do the peer review we started mainly for the certification because we wanted to build that confidence and trust. So it is important to see how does Kenya do it, how does Uganda do it, where are the gaps? And this has been helping. And of course, benchmarking, because there are international standards that govern these processes. So countries have been having procedures, but in some cases, you would find that maybe they are not linked to the best practices. So when you do the peer review, you are able to see where the gaps are. And it has even helped some countries because they are now able to get some support based on the results of the peer review. And we're also thinking of looking at it in all areas of conformity assessment, including also in calibration and verification. Like a case in point, I think we had, there was a challenge which became an NTB. When they do some calibration in Tanzania and verification, when it comes to Uganda, it's something else. So they did the peer review to see where the problem was, and they were able to see where the challenges was. Again, at one time, it was between Uganda and Kenya. They were able to do the peer review, and they identified where the challenges are. So it helps even to build each other's confidence, competence, and all those, which we all need to ensure that there is trust in these conformity assessment activities.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stella. I think those lessons learned and a good example of what East Africa has done, it's a really good lesson for what we should do within the AfCFTA. Our next speaker is David Bell. Yeah, we come from our regional economical community. We would like to hear from you on the European single market, how standard really helped to underpin the single market. David, thank you.
Sorry, just 1 second. Let me just find the right presentation. No, this isn't the right one. Okay, this is right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Majen, Chair. Thank you for the invitation to speak, and I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon. My name is David Bell. I'm the Director of Standards Policy at the British Standards Institution. I'm a member of the Council of ISO and the Board of ZLEC. SEN and ZLEC, as the SG said earlier, SEN is the ARSO of Europe and ZLEC is the AfCFTA of Europe. And they mirror the scopes of ISO and IEC in Europe. And several years ago, we agreed to create a task force on Africa so that we could organize the cooperation that exists between Europe and Africa at a continental level on standardization. And I'm pleased to be the chair of that organization, of that task force. I appreciate the irony of somebody from the UK making a presentation on the strength of the European Union single market at this time. And I'm sure that Brexit and its implications will come up during my presentation. But firstly, just to go back in time a little at the history of SEN and ZLEC. They were created more than 60 years ago by ISO and IEC members at the time that the European Economic Community and the European Free Trade Association was beginning, and they created SEN and ZLEC. But the work programs of SEN and ZLEC in terms of creating European standards was tiny until in the 1980s, the political agreement to create the European single market. So the Single European Act signed in 1986, which came into effect in 1992, and which established the European single market. It was during that period that the workload of SEN and ZLEC increased exponentially. And it had to, because at the start of the single market, there was over 160,000 national standards. So the complexity of placing products in national markets across Europe and trading across those borders was made more difficult because of the overlapping and the conflict between different national standards. And I'll tell you later how many European standards we replaced the 160,000 with. So today, Senelec has 32 member countries, and this means that one standard will apply in all 34 countries equally. So it's the 27 member countries of the European Union, plus the EFTA countries, Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland, plus those countries that are on an accession path to join the European Commission, so North Macedonia, Turkey, and Serbia, and then also the UK, which is on politically a different journey, but remains committed through the new trade and cooperation agreement to cooperate on standards. And part of the UK, specifically Northern Ireland, remains within the European single market, and all CE marking regulations remain in place there. But we're currently working on the statutes of Senelec so that the UK's membership can continue. In terms of the areas where Senelec work, we mirror the sectors that you would see in ISO and IEC. The busiest areas of work are in construction, in machinery and transport, and in electrotechnology. And the aim of the organizations is to harmonize international standards at a European level. And SEN has the Vienna Agreement, where it works with ISO on standards, and currently a third of the SEN European standards are identical to the ISO standards. Senelec is more successful. You can see that 78% of the Senelec standards are aligned completely with the IEC catalogue, and there are more that are based on IEC deliverables as well. So both SEN and Senelec have the aim of supporting the use of international standards first in Europe. So the principles that we work on are the WTO principles, which you will be familiar with. And I should at this point just pay tribute to the new Nigerian Secretary General of the WTO and her appointment to the role, which is an excellent sign of the importance of trade across the world. We focus on coherence, so this is why we adopt and withdraw our national conflicting standards. In fact, we should talk about the three principles on which SEN and Senelec work, and that is standstill. So it means that we don't take any action nationally while there is work going on to write a European standard. We adopt, it means we adopt all of the European standards as national standards. So every European standard is adopted in every European country. And we withdraw, so we withdraw any conflicting national standards to make sure that we have a coherence and all standards apply equally across all of the member states. So we're a signatory to the TBT agreement. We have a legal status as the European standards organizations to support the single market. And I'll talk in more detail about those instruments that do that. But standardization does not operate, as you know, in a vacuum. It is part of the European quality infrastructure. So that means metrology and conformity assessment as well, underpinned by a common approach to market surveillance. So I'll talk about the new legislative framework, or you may well be more familiar with its previous name of the new approach. This came in 2008. The new approach had been around since the 1980s. And that sets out the rules of how standards support technical regulations across the EU. It sets out the rules of market surveillance to protect consumers. It sets clear rules for the accreditation of conformity assessment bodies. So there was regulation issued in 2008 on accreditation. It boosts confidence in conformity assessment of products and specifically clarifies the meaning of CE marking and improves its credibility. And it sets out a common legal framework. So as Stella was talking about in EAC, the legal framework is critical to underpin the operation of the new legislative framework. So voluntary European standards play a role to support the mandatory European legislation, improving and enabling the internal market, supporting policymakers, and ultimately protecting European citizens. So I'll explain a little about how the system works. The legislation is agreed at the European Union level. So this is an activity of our public authorities. They set the compulsory rules for putting products onto the market. They set the essential requirements, the safety objectives of how you put safe products onto the European market. And they are underpinned by some of our European standards. They're the standards produced by the 3 ESOs, so SEN and Senelec, who I represent today, but also ETSI for telecoms. So we are private independent organizations who work together to produce voluntary standards that the market takes up. But some of our standards have a status to underpin EU legislation, and I'll talk more about that shortly. There are 23,000, so the figure you're waiting for, that replaced 160,000 national standards, are 23,000 European standards. And of those 23,000, 4,000 of them underpin the EU single market. They are what we call harmonized standards. So although all the 23,000 are standards that are used across every country of the Senate membership, only 4,000 of them have this special status as harmonized standards. So it means that they've been elaborated in an open and transparent manner. So we follow the multi-stakeholder approach, including all relevant stakeholders in our standardization activity. The European Commission has issued a request to those organizations in advance to write this particular standard. The standard is then adopted across the 34 countries of the European standards system. And once it is cited in the official journal of the European Union, it means in all the countries that are either in the EU or subject to EU rules, there is a presumption of conformity. So that means legally your product complies with the law if you can prove you meet the requirements of a particular European standard. And it's on that basis that products circulate freely around the EU single market. But as I said, standardization is just one part of the picture. We also have the quality infrastructure, where regulation, which includes everything from regulations right through to market surveillance. It's implemented by national authorities all around the world, the QI, and I was pleased to see Celestine from PACI on the call, because I know the work that is going on in Africa is significant. The regulations are adopted nationally, and therefore we need national standards, but our industry and other stakeholders need access to different markets. So they need to see that standards apply not just in one country, but around the world. So national standards need to be based on those global standards and are adopted only to meet specific needs. In the UK, for example, we produce around 2,500 new national standards or revised national standards each year. 95% of those standards are European and international standards. We produce very few new national standards because our stakeholders want to influence international and European standards, and they want to use them because they're interested in exporting their product and not just using it in the national market. So I'm pleased to say, and just to finish off, I'm pleased to say that in Africa, there are many partner organizations who are adopting European standards. And I saw that some of our partners are on the call today. There's about 10,000, I think, standards that are adopted, European standards adopted across Africa, mainly in those countries that are part of the EU Association Agreement in North Africa. But these are standards, sometimes based on international standards, but sometimes homegrown European standards that are now being adopted as national standards throughout Africa. And we are working through AFSEC and ARSO through the copyright agreement to make it simpler for our partners across ARSO and AFSEC to take European standards, to check that they meet the needs across Africa, and then to implement them as national standards across the continent. So this is the basis on which the EU single market works and the role that standards and standardizers play. There's a link to the European legislation. The European legislation gives the high-level health and safety, the essential health and safety requirements that the products need to meet when they are on the European market. The standards fill in the detail, having been written with the support of all relevant stakeholders. That gives a flexibility to the system, and then it's supported by a conformity assessment and market surveillance approach that is consistent across the 34 countries. Hermogen, that is the end of my presentation.
David, thank you very much. And when I look at the Vienna agreement that you had with ARSO, I think we could say that it helped to adopt directly those standards from ARSO, because you participate actively, you have that Vienna agreement, the same as the Senelec on Frankfurt agreement. And interesting that from 160,000 standard, you managed now to go to 23,000 standard, with 4,000 being harmonized standard. If I get it correctly, those came from the request from the European Union. If we look at the African Union, yeah, what do you think that we can do? Yeah, that we have a standard, harmonized the standard that are linking also to the registration to avoid the burden on different technical regulation that we might have among 55 countries. At least you have 34 countries. We have 55 countries, members of the African Union. Thank you.
And I'm sure that the experience in those 55 countries varies greatly, probably even more than the European countries vary in their approach. Clearly, the first step is the political support, and that's what has changed, it seems to me, in Africa recently, is that there is a clear legal framework. There is a clear desire under the AfCFTA for standardization to play a role to support the implementation of the free trade agreement. Obviously, the role of the regional economic communities across Africa is different to the European experience, and so they must play an important role. And actually, that could play a accelerating role in getting continental harmonization. I think for me, that once you have the political support, it's about creating the clear and transparent rules. It's following a multi-stakeholder approach. It's connecting up standards to the rest of the quality infrastructure, because they can't work on it in a vacuum. They must work alongside clear rules around certification and conformity assessment. The principle of adoption and withdrawal of conflicting standards is something that has worked well for Europe. It focuses the stakeholders' minds that they should participate in European standardization, because it will become your national standard. That's an experience that European countries found useful in accelerating the move to European standards. And then, of course, it's about prioritizing, because clearly the resources are scarce, especially now. We need to make sure that we're focused on the products that are most likely to be traded, the products that have the highest regulatory impact, so the dangerous products and the important products for consumers in particular. And the other thing I would say is that this never ends. There was, in 1992, when the European single market was created, it was the beginning of the journey. And the journey never ends, because constantly there are new challenges and there are new areas in which we can work together. And obviously these standards need the regular revision and update to make sure they're still fit for purpose. So we should never feel that we have reached the end of this process. Obviously, the UK leaving the European Union has created another challenge that we are working on. But really, it's about that constant evolution of single markets and working together on this. It's a journey.
Thank you, David. I think the next speaker will touch on it. Dr. Francis Mangani, now you got it all. You got it all that probably you will lead us and see what we should do, looking at the experience from the quality infrastructure organization, ARSO, and the PACI chair, looking at what East Africa has been doing, looking at what the European Union has been doing. Probably we will not be more talking to the AUC as the AUC on the issues of practicality. That's why we want to hear from you on the different stakeholders, how the AfCFTA Secretariat will move ahead and work with different stakeholders for the implementation of the AfCFTA agreement. Dr. Francis.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning. So first of all, I would like to pay highest tributes to you, Secretary General Harmonization, and the ARSO in general for organizing this event, which is very well attended. I've been checking the number of participants. It now stands at 277. So congratulations on a very successful event. And then secondly, thank you so much for inviting us as the Secretariat of the Afghan Continental Free Trade Area to participate. It has been a very enlightening experience. And actually, I'm now increasing my list of partners as of participating in this event. Now, let me share my PowerPoint and see how far we can go with it. Right, so now what are we trying to do as Africa? We are trying to create the future through blueprints. We have had this blueprint for building the African Economic Community, which has been running since 1994 when the Abuja Treaty entered force. And we expect that by the year 2028, after 34 years, we shall have the African Economic Community, which will be both an economic and monetary union. We at the same time have another blueprint, Agenda 2063, which is called the Africa We Want. And this Africa we want is integrated, peaceful, and prosperous, and is effective in international relations. It's a 50-year blueprint. In Africa, we take a developmental approach to regional integration. That means we need large markets to support critical levels of investment, of course, and we need industrialization, because with the markets without products to trade on them, the markets are not good at all. And then we need the infrastructure, which covers air transport, surface transport, because Africa is huge at 30 million square kilometers. You can squeeze into Africa, Europe, America, China, India, all of it. So we need air transport as well. But we need energy as well, and ICT to cope with the fourth industrial revolution. And we need political and macroeconomic stability. So that's what we are trying to do. Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area is part of this journey. It is an agreement which covers 55 countries, all the African countries, including and covers trading goods and services, dispute settlement, investment, intellectual property, competition, and e-commerce. But as also will be pointed out, so far we have got an agreement on trade governance, or the governance aspect of it, as well as trading goods and services and dispute settlement. We yet have to develop protocols on investment, intellectual property, competition, and e-commerce. So it's a legally binding agreement. And as you remember, Ben has just told us that a legally binding framework is extremely important. Stella also told us that this was a strength of the East African community. Now, what's the state of play? Where are we now? 54 of the 55 countries have signed. 36 have ratified, the latest being Zambia. We have 41 tariff offers, 34 services offers. We have a mechanism for dealing with non-tariff barriers. And you know that non-tariff barriers can come in the form of technical and health standards as well. And trading has commenced. Now, we have got strong political will, because in under 5.5 years, we have moved from commencement of negotiations, which was on the 15th of June, 2015, to signing the agreement on the 21st of March, 2018, to the agreement entering force on the 30th of May, 2019, and now to commencement of trading on the 1st of January, 2021. Now, you remember that our brother from the EU told us that political will is also extremely important. So the heads of state and government at that high level have really owned this process and driven it proactively. So now, what are the strategic objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area? We want to build a single market for the Africa we want. And this single market should have the following characteristics. It should be inclusive. That means everybody should benefit. We should not leave anybody behind. We should therefore prioritize women, young Africans, and SMEs as vulnerable sectors of our society. It should be transformative. That means we need strategies. That means that we need strategies that make markets, industrialization, infrastructure effective. It should be functional. That means all institutions should be activated, including quality infrastructure institutions, as well as the committees under the SPS Annex, the TBT Annex. It should be rule-based. That means full implementation and compliance with the annexes and the agreement as well. This compliance must also be with regard to the SPS and the TBT annexes. Knowledge, innovation, and technology-driven AfCFTA. It should be fit for the fourth industrial revolution. Therefore, e-certificates. I saw what Celestine was presenting to us, which would be a dream come true if it actually happened. One standard, one test, one certificate. I would say one e-certificate. This would be wonderful indeed. And it should be globally networked. We need a universal Africa based on science diplomacy. So that's why partnerships, including with Senelec, would be extremely important. And of course, we need a secretariat which is well-resourced, which is fit for purpose. And this is important because the secretariat is the technical arm of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We therefore, on the basis of these strategic objectives, must have partners on board, and we must have stakeholders on board. And this must include standards bodies for efficacy. We will not do anything, actually. I mean, we will not achieve what we want to achieve without these partners. These partners can be financial partners for obvious reasons that we have financial shortfalls. They can be partners in terms of sharing equipment and materials. They could be knowledge generation and management partners. They could be partners for undertaking advocacy and awareness creation. They could be partners just for promoting that spirit of the world, or of humankind as a family, of nations working together in a friendly and cordial atmosphere, international committee, or that we are an international community. And of course, ARSO is at the core of this when it comes to standards. Now, our partners therefore must include the African Union itself as the overarching continental body, state parties, member states who are yet to become state parties through ratification, parliaments across Africa because they pass laws and they provide oversight, regulatory departments, including standards bodies, economic operators, these are the users, as well as industry associations, civil society because they are vigilant, and the academia for providing input. So all these are partners that we need to have on board. As well as, of course, among the state parties or member states, we must include regional economic communities as well. Now, what's the role of the Secretariat? It is the technical arm of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and it therefore has a critical role to play. You could say in common parlance that the Secretariat is the organization that says to you, there is a solution whenever you have a problem. This is the come-to place. So then the Secretariat helps with the settlement of disputes when they come up. This could be in terms of disputes between the countries. We have a panel process system for settling disputes, as well as an appellate body akin to the WTO system. We also have of course, the system for dealing with the non-tariff barriers. Convening powers, that means we bring the countries together to sit down and deliberate on policy, on implementation, on review of what's on the ground, and of course, on charting the way forward. We are a knowledge and innovation hub, and then we try to use an evidence-based policy approach in order to make sure that what we do is actually based on truth, on what's knowable, on what can be known. Agenda setting, we participate in agenda setting in convening these meetings, but also in what we put on the agenda as issues for deliberation. We undertake advocacy across Africa and across the world, in fact, in engaging partners, and we promote awareness creation. So then what we do, we mobilize and work with partners to reinforce interventions, for instance, standards bodies. We resolve non-tariff barriers through technical papers with recommendations, bilateral facilitation, that's the facilitation of bilateral meetings between the countries that have issues, mediation, arbitration, and then of course assisting with the compliance. And then we identify products for and develop regional standards to facilitate trade and to ensure safety and quality in those categories or for those products where regional standards are required. But of course, as everybody knows, we go by international standards. That's what our TBT and SPS annexes say. But there will be those areas where we need regional standards. For instance, where I am in Ghana here, we've got palm wine, all right? Yeah, so we need a standard on palm wine, which we might not be able to find elsewhere. And they are unique products, you know, that may need this. So this is what I have to say, Mr. Amaji. These are my contacts in case somebody wants to get in touch with me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. I would be very happy to take any question if there is any. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mangani. Very interesting looking at that you are a technical arm in charge of dispute settlement, in charge of, you have convening powers, and you touched also on regional standards, of course, basing on when an international standard exists, we go with the international standard. We had also the TBT Annex 6 that requests ARSO and AfCFTA to develop such standards that are for interest for Africa. One question to you and actually to Oswald, who is also still with us, although we couldn't finish his presentation. Can we say we will be expecting at ARSO, at AfCFTA, the request now to develop standards, because if the implementation started on 1st January, then in the next few months, probably we'll be looking at some dispute settlement that need harmonized standard. Can we say that very soon we will be sending us letters? Can you develop such standards?
We shall be sending you invitation letters to come and be part and parcel of us, to work jointly with us. So for instance, when we have the inaugural meetings of the committees under the TBT Annex, the SPS Annex, we shall definitely invite you to come and help us develop terms of reference, the work program over the next 5 years. So you are an integral part of this process. As you say yourself, you are mentioned in the instruments, and you are our continental body. So yes, for sure, actually the letters are on the way. They are on the way, but it will not be just a one-off, when there's a problem or, this sort of thing. I think we are going to have an organic partnership where we work continuously together on all matters. You will be invited to all the meetings relating to standards. So this is what I can assure you about.
Thank you very much. Oswald, if you are still around, because your topic was technical regulation within AfCFTA. What is your take? Oswald, are you still with us? Yeah, while waiting for Oswald,
Mr. Hamajin, there are some two or three questions in the chat box. I don't know whether you've seen them. Maybe,
yes, I have seen them. Yeah, I want to pick a few. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Do you want to answer one of them immediately before I move to others? Because I am picking a few. Yeah, we have only 15 minutes to go. Then let me start with one of the questions that Ruben, you can answer this question. Do we, as you saw the presentation actually from David, there is 160,000 standards that were at national level. That's now at 23,000. And one of the questions actually being asked earlier before that presentation was, can we have a clearing house to see the national standards that exist and the technical regulation that exist at national level? And we get really to know the work, the clear work that we need to reduce probably from those disparity at the national level to have harmonized standard. How can we do that to have a clearing house? Or what is your take, Ruben?
Yeah, thank you, Secretary General. And this is one of the ideas that we have entertained for quite some time now, that we do need to know what exists at the national levels. And I think it's an ongoing job that we need to understand what kind of standards exist at the national level, what kind of standards exist at the regional economic communities, and putting them side by side to understand that these standards are addressing the same scope. And once you understand they are addressing the same scope, you look at the disparities, or you look at the commonalities. And once that is done, then it is possible to say, let us harmonize and have one standard. So once our committees that we have revamped are able to start moving, this is one of the aspects that we shall be addressing, so that each country brings to the table the kind of standard they have for each particular product that we are tackling. And then from there, we harmonize and we do away with the national standards. As of now, we do not have a kind of knowledge on how many standards exist. We know some countries have very many standards, others have just very few in terms of tens, and that's the nature of Africa. But we need to understand, if we are talking about a standard on maize, a common product in the continent, you might find that all the 54 countries or 55 countries have a separate standard. And then we have the regional economic community standards. But ideally, we just need one standard. So it's a process that we have embarked on, and we expect that in time, we should be able to reduce the numbers to just one standard for each product that we trade in. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that there is a study done by ARSO on priority sector for harmonization. I think one key issue is probably also to circulate and create awareness on such study done with UNECA and ARSO. I think it's very important to share the study with the Secretariat, AfCFTA Secretariat, and other stakeholders. Linking to that, David, someone asked actually a similar question. How did you deal with issues of national interest from that 160,000 standard to 23,000?
Well, national interest is a key part of the positions that we take in ISO in every standards world. I think, first of all, you need that political will to harmonize the standards. And then you need to take action in order to deliver it. And certainly when I first was involved in European standardization in the 1990s, I was working on some construction standards that were very difficult to harmonize because we had national standards that we had built our national industries on. And so they were very reluctant to give away their knowledge. So it took many years, sometimes 5 years, up to 10 years even to get agreement on this. And it took political pressure to make a change. But ultimately, now we start with the European standard before we build a national standard in a product. But it takes that political pressure and that political will to make it work. I think the first generation was the hardest. The future generations of standards have been much easier.
Yeah, saying that we are part of the future generation, meaning we can do this. Thank you. Francis, someone asked, that are you happy as the AfCFTA Secretariat on the way you have engaged the private sector, the business community?
Yeah, I would say that in the negotiations, the business community was involved in a number of ways. Either they were part of the delegations that went to the negotiations, or they were part of the consultations that took place at the national level in formulating our positions, or they were in fact invited through technical papers to present their positions in the negotiations. So there was a degree of involvement which was visible. it could have been better. We can always do better, but there was some involvement. However, now that we have started trading, the studies that I'm seeing, for instance, done by UNDP, there was one which was done for the ESC recently. The figures seem to show that awareness of the African Continental Free Trade Area among industry is quite low. In Ghana, for instance, only 26%. In ESC, the numbers are even, I think, lower, which is really alarming. So what this means is that we have our work cut out for us. We need to scale up awareness creation activities. And even events like this, where we have participants from various sectors, are also useful in promoting awareness. But we need all of us, whether it's you, ARSO, whether it's the Secretariat, whether it's ESC, the regional economic communities, to all work together, the member states, in order to promote awareness about the African Continental Free Trade Area, the opportunities, the processes, the need for quality infrastructure, and for conformity assessment. The need for producers to have products which are actually safe, of good quality, and which protect the environment as well. We all need to undertake this awareness creation and to scale it up, because it is still low at the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. we should work together, all of us.
Yes,
as you say, it's not just the Secretariat. Thank you very much. Oswald, I see that you are back. Yeah.
Yes.
We couldn't get the full presentation that you had, but it was on technical regulation. What is your take, especially on the model that European Union is doing? Yeah, I was asking Francis that we're gonna be receiving invitation on the issues of developing standard maybe coming from the dispute in the near future. What do you see at the AUC level that we should do on this issue of technical regulation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, SG. And first of all, let me apologize to our distinguished participants and you, the organizers, for that technical hitch, which unfortunately prevented me from completing my presentation. But I'm happy to note that I think in the presentations that we had from Ruben, from Celestine, from EAC, there was enough about technical regulations there for people to get a good grasp of what they mean. In answering your question, actually, you give me an opportunity to add what would have been in my presentation as well. The European approach is definitely something that we need to learn from ourselves. As you would know, I'm happy to inform our dear participants that in responding to the challenges on technical regulations that have been highlighted already by the different speakers, the PACI Joint Committee, under the leadership of Chairperson Celestine, of course, and with the very kind assistance of our cooperating partners, PTB of Germany, has already put in place a concept paper on the approach that Africa can take in dealing with technical regulations. And in this concept paper, we of course borrow ideas from the likes of the EU and other regions across the world that have gone ahead of us in this. And ultimately, we're going to workshop this paper with stakeholders, especially the quality infrastructure stakeholders and then the regulatory authorities in state parties, as we nearly always do under the Joint Committee of PACI and AUC-DTI. And we'll present this to exactly the committee that Dr. Mangani was referring to, the Committee on TBT, for their consideration. Remember, of course, that the AfCFTA is a member state-driven process, and the political authority comes from the institutions that the AfCFTA has put in place. So, you know, the partnerships that Dr. Mangani was referring to are going to be very important for us moving forward. Why recreate the wheel when, you know, we can borrow from those that have demonstrated successes? And of course, we want to make sure that the problems that we saw at our rec levels, we can, you know, avoid at the AfCFTA level. And this is something that should be very exciting. Allow me to finish by, you know, pointing out that, of course, everything that's legal in member states in most of our member states anyway, is usually put to stakeholder consultation. And I really want to appeal to our colleagues in the quality infrastructure institutions that when their governments circulate technical regulations for adoption, they are our people, our technical people on the ground to look thoroughly into these documents and ensure that, you know, the kind of conflict that we see sometimes does not occur, because they understand the standardization world and they understand the technical regulation world. And if we can get at member state level all these sort of simple problems being avoided, then at continental level, it should be an easier walk. And then, of course, Dr. Mangani also pointed out to you that the annex on TBT anticipates the participation in their work of the likes of the party constitutions, ARSO, AfSec, AfriMeds, and AFRAC. But thank you once again for the invitation to participate at this meeting, and apologies for the hitch up.
Thank you, Dr. Chinyamakovu. Allow me, participant, just 10 minutes on wrap up. I have other two questions. One is addressed to Stella, where one of the participants has said that at national level within the EAC member state, there are still technical regulation that are different, are deviating from the harmonized EAC standard. What is the way forward if you look at it and you have a policy instrument that actually should avoid such cases? Stella.
Thank you, and thank you for the question.
You can unmute, please, unmute.
Yes, sorry about that, it unmuted it. I'm saying integration is really a process, and despite the experiences we have shared, does not mean that everything is really going on. You could see that from my challenges that I talked about, to issues of sovereignty, issues of competition. So these issues are always there, but one good thing, the ESC is aware, and currently, like I said, we try to employ the stepwise approach really in handling problems as they are, because like some of these issues, they end up being NTBs, then they are handled from that NTB angle. And some of them that can be handled technically, they are handled technically. Those issues are there, like currently we have still the issue on some partner states not recognizing the quality marks. In some cases, these are handled as NTBs, but also the EAC is looking at ways of continuously addressing these challenges. The most important thing is ensuring that there is that feedback. And because now to some extent, most partner states are aware of these policy instruments, these issues come out. That is good enough because they come out either in the borders, because sometimes we also have border monitoring visits, which is a joint activity. So those are some of the areas you get to know some of these challenges. The challenges are there, EAC is aware and is committed really to see that they are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Celestine, one key message to take with us today while we are closing? Yeah.
The message, I guess somebody also raised the issue of how do we address I saw the question, how do you address the challenge of very few accreditation bodies in Africa? My message may answer that question, and my message is very simple. The AfCFTA Secretariat, as Francis has promised us, will need a coordinated work with the quality infrastructure pillars, and specifically on accreditation, they will want to borrow the idea that Stella shared with us on possibilities of adopting peer evaluations that we can, on the interim, implement while we motivate our member states to continue building their quality infrastructure so that we can have more accreditation bodies, full MRM members of ILAC and IAF, so that we don't just trade with ourselves alone, so that the same goods and services we trade within after our single market can also trade with our European colleagues or American colleagues. So that's a very huge work we need to do. But let's have a continuation of this conversation going forward, both with the AfCFTA Secretariat and QI institutions. And ARSO has done well in leading this discussion, but I think it's time for PACI to sit up and begin to put solutions on the table, not just proposals, solutions. So thank you everyone for coming, and that's where I think we should go right now.
Thank you, thank you. 30 seconds for each speaker on one key recommendation. Starting with you, Ruben, what is one key recommendation we can go with? 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to really move forward to understanding that trade is underpinned by rules, and some of the most transparent and key things to do is having harmonized standards. And without that, I think we might talk about trade, but it will never happen because we'll be having divergent standards that block us from doing trade among ourselves. And that is a tragedy that we need to avoid.
Yeah, harmonized standard. Thank you very much. Oswald, Dr. Oswald, one key recommendation we can take.
Thank you, Dr. Hemogene. Well, cooperation, and more cooperation. We are creating a single market, and that is what we need to do. From the 55 fragmented markets that we were currently having, we are going to have a single market. And as we saw in the presentation from the Sensenelac, you can see that we need to reduce this, myriad of standards to converge on those that will be adopted and applied in every member state so that we can trade seamlessly. And we need to cooperate for that. So it's cooperation for me.
Thank you. Cooperation. Stella, what is the take of the day?
Yeah, thank you, Imogen. I think really the issue is integration is a process. It needs involvement of all the stakeholders, information sharing, partnership, and at it all, whatever intervention, it should make sense to trade.
Thank you. It's a process. We should bring all the players together, stakeholders. David, what is the take of the day?
Well, I can echo Oswald's point about cooperation. I think that's really important. Europe stands ready to cooperate with our African QI partners. On this call already is the head of accreditation bodies for Europe, the head of metrology bodies for Europe, and people from the standards bodies from Europe. So we are very committed to this relationship. So we would love to work more closely together and mentor and twin where you think it would be helpful and learn what you can from our experience, some of which was positive, some of which wasn't. We should be clear about that. But I want to thank you and also for organizing the webinar. Excellent audience and great speakers. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Francis, what is the take?
Yeah, so I agree with what all the colleagues have said, but I would add also that this point from Celestine, one standard, one test, one e-certificate, this is where we need to work towards. And then I would specifically suggest to you humbly, if ARSO could have this series of webinars continuously, regularly. I think this would be helpful. You can see you have a very good participation. So it means there is there's demand for this kind of events. So if you can have them regularly, maybe every 2 months or so, or even more frequently, I think that it would be a good contribution you would be making to the process and to the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have each month. We have one webinar each month. Thank you.
Oh, I wasn't aware.
Yeah,
good. Please, now can I change my takeaway? Please involve us all. Involve us all.
Yeah, thank you. One standard, one test, one certificate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, participant. I recognize that we had ARSO president earlier on participating. I recognize our former president ARSO, Dr. Eve, who has been also with us, and all the participants that I can not mention directly right now. Thank you very much. We look forward to the next webinar next month. We will share the topic and the presenters. Thank you, the speakers. It was really very wonderful. Yeah, thank you for your excellent presentation and answering the question from us and the participants. Thank you a lot. See you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.